Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Dexter episode 4. So, going into this episode, we mainly focus on Harrison, whether he is to actually be a hero in this story or he is to be the villain. So, we are going to eventually play that out within this episode to try to put the pieces together. Dexter is to go on and investigate his own son to just kind of see whether things really and truly add up the way they do, and we'll eventually get that result by the end of this episode. We also have Dexter, who is spending an awful lot of time, if we don't have him at the tail end of the episode, spending time with Kurt. It seems that now Dexter has gone on to seemingly be spending even more time with Kurt in this episode. And Molly, who had just kind of randomly appeared seemingly on the last episode, is already starting to become very much more of a useful character. And also having it to be that, like, this character is starting to get some much more like unique things going on into this story, which I can really just enjoy it. So with that said, like very little for everyone else kind of going on here. Deborah is to have, of course, another kind of fun, hilarious thing that she is to go on and do in this episode, if not also to be helping Dexter with his investigations and having Deborah kind of spell things out for Dexter and so on and so forth. So, really, just still a really interesting episode. Much more interesting than certain other episodes have been, but like you eventually have to have some kind of episode that like doesn't exactly like have the best foot forward because they'll have to do so many possible episodes. So, with that said, I think that's pretty much all that I have to say about this show, or this episode, really. Um, I would say that there's some really interesting writing here, and I like the fact that it doesn't feel exactly like the other Dexter show. There's some shades of it, of course, but like it always also doesn't have to come down to Dexter having to kill somebody every single episode to keep it interesting. And so we can kind of just play with these things and kind of play with these characters and kind of develop these characters instead of having to have us find the most interesting thing about a show is Dexter's kill room and that's it. Because it's like, man, who is he going to kill next? What is going to be the story about it? That would only be the interesting thing about a Dexter show. But now it seems like we have something much more interesting, which is to figure out some of these characters and like piece them together and so on and so forth. So with that said, let's just go into spoilers. Let's go in more in depth. Good show. Really liked it. Really liked this episode. I don't know how I could just like go on and like say much more about this to make it feel like it's not just an in general kind of episode kind of review. But yeah, like we also seem to have some kind of podcast that Molly used to deliver that is to be very reminiscent to season 4. And so people who, of course, remember season 4 and remember how that ended uh, will go into this episode to be like, oh yeah, like I remember that whole story. Like I remember that. Like it was so many seasons ago. But man, was that season like a huge success. Uh, so, anyways, let's go into that double five time territory. Let's just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time you just again to spoil this episode. So, episode 4 starts off where episode 3 kind of ended, where we, of course, are to have Kurt, who had mentioned that he had gotten a FaceTime call with Matt. And so Dexter is to go and call Angela and tell her that supposedly Kurt had gotten a call from uh, his son. Dexter also is to say that like Kurt was very drunk at the time that Dexter was told this, but supposedly Kurt was going off to get drunk and celebrate the fact that he had talked to his son. So, like, the whole reason for Kurt going out and drinking was to celebrate the fact that it seemed that Matt was still alive. And so Dexter is calling Kurt, or Dexter is calling Angela and telling uh, this to Angela because it's the right thing to do. I wonder if Kurt did that on purpose so that way he would go back around and kind of having Kurt try to dispel certain things because he wants to go and solve this whole thing himself. Because we, of course, had seen that Kurt had taken a life into his own hands in a previous episode, and it seems by the end of this episode he is going to do that again. So Dexter is to, of course, now try and put the pieces together with the help of Deborah, placing numerous pictures on the ground to try to have like kind of a murder wall going off on the floor, having it to where supposedly Kurt is possibly going to go after Johnny or any number of people that Kurt could think could have been the murderer here, and really go after them and try to kill them off, delaying Angela from the real information that Kurt never actually talked to his son. So, but also Kurt is going to want to get time to maybe snuff out the real murderer, who is Dexter. And so now Kurt, I think, is taking that time to consistently be with Dexter to see if he can kind of whiff or sniff something out. So, and Deborah is to already kind of warn Dexter of that, where it's like, yeah, it's only a matter of time before like Kurt is gonna find or figure or find you out, because it seems that already Kurt is gonna be spending some quality time with Dexter. But wait. Let's put a pause in that quality time. Let's get to this other scene here. So, in the very early stages of this episode, we have Dexter who's going to work like it's a normal day, and all of a sudden there's there's an emergency alarm or emergency alert, like an Amber alert or whatever, and so Dexter is of course getting this text letting everybody know what had happened, and so Angela is calling Dexter saying like, hey, did you just get that alert? And Dexter is like, well, yeah, like what happened? And so Angela is mentioning that there was a problem at this school with with something relating to Harrison. And so Dexter is to go and run to this school and go and check out what happened to Harrison. We also, before like Dexter was to get that alert, he was talking to like Fred Jr. and like he had, I guess, brought in his dog Garfield, and it seems like Fred Jr. was having some problems with this dog. I guess because it's a new dog and maybe he doesn't like his own name and so on and so forth. So weirdly, that conversation doesn't really seem all that important, but it is what it is. So Dexter goes off to this school, and we immediately have one of the kind of deputies, who's Teddy, who is to bring Dexter in. So Dexter is to see Harrison seemingly stabbed, but I guess it wasn't that deep. And so we find there's a bloodied trail where Ethan is to be, where Ethan was, because he was to be hauled out via stretcher, having a leg wound. So we immediately have like Dexter assessing the situation of where his son was stabbed and any number of things, but everybody is to basically call Harrison a hero, and Harrison is to mention that Ethan was mentioning that he was going to go and try to shoot up his class, but weirdly, Ethan did not have a gun on him. He just had a knife on him, weirdly. So I'm like, so if he was going to shoot up his class, why does he only have a knife on him? Like, you would think that maybe telling this person what is going on and this person like not having this easy agreement, or Ethan would assume that, like, why wouldn't he, like, but I guess it's just good that like Harrison had caught Ethan at the right time, I guess, weirdly. So Ethan, I guess, had wrestled with the knife, or with like Harrison and Ethan wrestled with this knife, and so Harrison got to stab Ethan in the leg after supposedly Ethan had stabbed Harrison for not agreeing to shooting up this school, supposedly. So we have Angela, who's basically calling Harrison a hero, and that they ended up going through his notebook, seeing this whole list of people that Ethan wanted to go and seek revenge on, and all these like kind of very dark and disturbing images. So yeah, like they immediately just completely buy Harrison's story just because of this notebook full of this like this dark imagery that was to have been drawn by Ethan. So we we go on, and like I'm gonna go in a roundabout way here after this moment to not like clearly do this all perfect and fine and whatever. So uh Dexter is to go on and like appear uh at Angela's office to mention that, like, after Dexter had talked to Harrison, and Dexter is to realize maybe the wounds of Harrison probably doesn't match the story that Harrison was to have. And so Dexter goes into the office and sees a bunch of like knives that were used and other things. And so Dexter is to take this opportunity to tell Angela, it's like, well, hey, like, I do have a little bit of information that Ethan had gone on to buy these certain kinds of things at my store. Like, uh, like we have Dexter, I guess, just being that guy that has to kind of connect everything to, like, well, hey, he bought these things at my store. I guess there's a record of it, so on and so forth. So, like, these were actually Ethan's things that he bought. So, like, planning for something, we're not 100% sure. Audrey is to also see the notebook and is to also have the number of, like, pictured thing that is to show the people that Ethan was going to go after at some point. And so Audrey ends up taking a picture of it and then she leaves. And so I'm like, well, why did she do that? Like, Ethan obviously is to be a character that is to be taken care of. Like, what is the end result of, like, Audrey doing any of this? Is she gonna go after these people? Is she gonna, like, set them right? Like, why is Audrey taking this photo? I'm just so confused here. What she's gonna do about that afterwards? So we transition here, and so Molly is to go and talk to Angela, and so Molly, who is the podcaster and so on and so forth, where Harrison was to go and listen to one of these podcasts from Molly, who she was to talk about the Trinity Killer, of course, the killer from season 4, that used to kill his characters in a certain kind of way, really very much ending most of his Trinity kills with, of course, a woman bathed in blood, sadly enough. So, of course, Molly is to do a podcast about the Trinity Killer and Harrison's mother while Harrison is listening to this. And then, weirdly, shortly thereafter, there was the Amber Alert, and Harrison was to have been stabbed, supposedly, by Ethan. And it's like, well, that's a weird coincidence that he was just listening to that podcast, and then all of a sudden someone was to almost end up dead. So now we go on to have, of course, Molly is going on to talk to Angela, and it's like, hey, like, I have a great opportunity for you, because Molly had gone on to find one of Angela's missing persons cases. Like, hey, she goes by Laura now. Like, there was some unsavory characters that had been attached to her family. So Laura just decided that she wanted to just disappear. So Molly goes on and is to tell Angela, like, hey, how about we go out of our way to try and solve these missing persons cases? And that can be Molly's thing. And I'm wondering if Molly might just be this person, but we're not sure yet. If these people do go missing and Molly ends up finding them, I'm wondering if she's going to find them and then possibly murder them, because she may also be a killer as well. But then we can also just turn around and maybe just saying that this is her, like, one good deed, or her just trying to, like, butter up to Angela to maybe get some kind of exclusives, or eventually get some kind of, like, I'm waiting for somebody to just kind of turn around and just be manipulating somebody, or like playing some game or something. and it'll be interesting to see, like, if Molly can kind of bribe her way into working with Angela by just saying like, hey, I'm helping you out, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like, but I want something in return. So we're gonna see how that all plays out with Molly and Angela, and we'll see if it goes south or if it just seems like an honest thing where it's like, okay, this is interesting here, where Molly is like going for one case and then finding out that she's like, well, hey, how about I do something in the meantime? So, speaking of meantime, uh, Kurt. Kurt is to go and, I guess, own a diner. And so we have, of course, this waitress who is to be Susan, who is to tell Kurt there is to be one girl who is to consistently be like sitting in the front of this diner, I guess either begging for money or just consistently asking for it, because Kurt is to go back out there to speak to this lady called Chloe. And so Chloe is to go on and mention that all that she needs is cab fare. And so Kurt is just like, well, didn't I technically give you enough money for cab or bus fare? Not cab fare, bus fare. And so Chloe was like, well, like, once I got money, I need money to eat. Like I needed like somewhere to sleep. I needed like, so this girl is to consistently ask for bus fare to just turn around and try to do something else with it. So this girl is never going to get bus fare. And so Kurt is trying to do the nice thing, and it's to tell Chloe, well, you know what? How about this? Like, how about you come and you work for me, and then you can find that bus fare. Like, you can make a pretty good living doing what you're doing. So, like, you might as well just kind of work with me here. Like, work with me here, and you'll get that bus fare. And she's like, yeah, no. Like, I just want to figure out how I can get that bus fare. So Kurt is just like, so in other words, you're trying to swindle. You're not going through this the honest way. So you're going to go through this another way. Because Kurt is to go and take Chloe where he had taken that other woman, and it seems that Kurt is preparing Chloe to eventually be shot and killed like that other woman was. But this time around, it seems like this girl is to be put here not by force, but by like just Kurt just really not liking this woman, and I can understand why, but he ends up like turning around and just like, hey, like, how about you come to my house so I can just shoot you? Because you're gonna get your cab fare, or your cab fare. What do I keep saying cab fare? You're gonna find your bus fare to heaven. Or maybe if you're a horrible person, there's that too. So so now that we've technically resolved that story and we gotten to the end of that story, so let's talk about the Dexter Harrison thing. So Dexter is to go off and is to replay the scene with Deb as the person that is going to help him kind of copy this blood splatter like thing. So Dexter is to go on and is to have Deb at some point like having this like weird, goofy parade of herself, like all over this one, uh, like this one thing of like Dexter, yeah, like Dexter, yeah. Like there's a bunch of signs and like Dexter, like, we love you, Dexter, and all these like goofy signs, and Dexter is to away the confetti. That is to be at this weird, goofy party parade thing that Dev is throwing for Dexter weirdly. So Deborah is to now go on and replay the scene with Deborah of what could have actually happened. And so how this is to actually play out is that Harrison was the first to strike, and then Harrison had went on to stab himself and not Ethan stab him. And Dexter figures that all out. That like Ethan was kind of fearing for his life and then was to go off and try to like get away from Harrison. And so Dexter is to now have to go into Harrison's room to try to find a knife that Harrison is to have, to see if maybe he does have a dark passenger within him. Because if Harrison doesn't have a knife in his room at all, then maybe he is really just this being his very first time, or really he, like, maybe there is something about the story that could somehow be justified, but Dexter doesn't think of it that way. So, hence why Dexter is consistently asking Harrison certain things about Ethan, where Dexter is asked Ethan, it's like, well, or ask Harrison about Ethan, mentioning it's like, well, hey, was there any evidence that like Ethan was like a disturbed kid? And Harrison was like, no, like not really, not until like he stabbed me. And we obviously are the ones who have seen this show and realized that there was obvious evidence right away when Harrison was going and talking to Ethan, and that whole notebook was obviously present early on. So Harrison was trying as much as possible to even be nice, to go to Ethan's almost bedside. And so Ethan is to see both, or Ethan, Harrison is to go on to see both Ethan's parents. And so Harrison is talking to Ethan's parents, and so Ethan's mother is to tell Harrison, it's like, you know what, like if you could have seen a sign of this happening, like why didn't you come to us? Like why didn't you say anything to us? It's like, well, like everything probably happened so quickly that like Ethan could have just said it was that. Like all of this started to happen so quickly that Ethan didn't really know until it was too late. And so Ethan's father is to go and tell Harrison, it's like, well, I hope we never see you again. Like, we never want to see you again. And also, like, they are going to, of course, have to move away from this town because this whole family is basically getting death threats because what had happened. So yeah, so we also have a scene where Deputy Logan is going to this school and is to go on and talk about like about possible grief, and there might be grief counselors, and just kind of like assessing how people are possibly feeling from this whole incident. And so of course we end up having the one jock like kid who is to just say, it's like, well, hey, like we all like really appreciate what Harrison had done, and everybody's like, yeah, Harrison, yeah. Like they're all cheering for him and whatever. And so like everybody's also like, speech, 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 like Harrison should say something about it. And so like I don't know what it like, I want to just kind of like figure out like what Audrey, like if we could have a narration somewhere, like I would really like there to be like Audrey's narration, just to see what's going on or rattling around in her brain for any number of these scenes. Because I always want to know what like Audrey is thinking as she's looking at Harrison or any number of things, and I wish there was a narration for that character. Weirdly, so Harrison is to go on and stand up and is to mention, it's like, well, hey, like, you know what, like, Ethan, yeah, like, it was a horrible thing that he did, like, I'm paraphrasing here, and, but, like, Harrison is to also mention that Ethan was horrifically bullied and beaten and everything like that by certain students. And that wasn't right either. And that maybe everyone is to have certain sides about them, whether they are to be the victim or the monster. And so, like, really it's just like you really have to, I guess, get to know somebody and then hope that you can get to them before it's too late, kind of thing. And so everybody's just kind of clap about Harrison's speech because it's like very poetic and whatever, to just be like, hey man, like we really shouldn't be bullying anybody anymore, because like it's going to eventually end up turning out to be uh, having another Ethan here that is just going to go on to possibly go and stab another person in school, and it'll bring together a horrific scene that we had already seen upon this episode. So Dexter is to go through uh, Harrison's things, and is to eventually go and find a like a switchblade, like one of those old fashioned razors. And Dexter is to realize that Harrison is to have a dark passenger, and Deborah is just to be mortified that Harrison is to possibly be just like Dexter, because Deborah through this whole episode was trying to tell Dexter, it's like, oh, like Harrison is nothing like you. Like you're both the complete opposites, and like he is not gonna have this dark passenger like you are to have. And so like, so Deb is kind of building us up to having like Deborah like saying that Harrison is not going to be this murderer. But then we turn around and feel like there is possible evidence that is to really just feel of another kind of way here. So we also, let's go and talk about the whole drone scene that I kind of skipped around about here. Like right before Harrison was to go and do that whole speech and talk to this class and whatever. Uh, because Harrison had taken some time off because, of course, he was wounded and he took antibiotics. And so Dexter's like, well, hey, like, how was the antibiotic? Because, like, I'm sure a lot of people could get sick during antibiotics and so on and so forth and feel horrible after taking them. I've heard numerous cases. So, really, just Harrison is just kind of feeling, uh, like bad about having to go on and like hurt Ethan, having to uh, do that kind of thing, and also Harrison is to ask uh, Dexter, has he ever been in an event like that where it's kind of changed his life? And Dexter is to go on and think about the whole like chainsaw like event when he was a kid. And Harrison is to ask Dexter, it's like, well, what should I do? Like, how should I deal with that kind of event that just happened? And Dexter is like, I don't know. Because Dexter's answer is like, well, I go into a kill room and stab people in the heart. Like, that's how I deal with it. And so Dexter doesn't have a real answer for Harrison here. And so Dexter, like, probably could have just, like, summed it up of, like, well, like, maybe I might not have an answer for you, but like we can always like talk about it, and maybe you can like maybe it's something as simple as getting it off your chest, or just kind of talking about like that's what Dexter is really just there for, is a person to talk to, uh, like a shoulder to cry on kind of situation, or whatever Harrison is to need. Like Dexter can be there for that, but Dexter never really says that. He's just like, that's the funny thing, is like Dexter like is to seem to have the answers here, but he doesn't. Um, or it just seems like he isn't coming up with the answers at the right time. So all of a sudden, Kurt is to come in here to give Harrison a gift, which we find out is a drone, because Kurt is to say, it's like, hey, I'm going to give like Harrison a gift for being this town's hero. So here's a gift, Harrison. So Harrison goes and opens up this gift drone. And so, like, I'm thinking, like, well, yeah, that does make a lot of sense, because Harrison was going and playing with that one drone that the one detective had, like, during that whole case. So it just makes a lot of sense for him to technically have a drone. And so we'll see what happens with this drone in other episodes, what he does with it, and so on and so forth. So Dexter was asking Harrison if he wants to take another day off of school, or like, or what he really wants to do. And so Harrison is decided, well, I really want to get back into a routine of things. And so Dexter's like, okay, great. And Harrison, at the very early beginning of this episode, was trying to gain 5 pounds for wrestling. And so he was, I guess, getting like a mixture of muscle milk and I guess certain other kind of like proteins and stuff like that, like powders and stuff like that. I've seen uh, like some of the stuff that, uh, of course, Harrison is taking here. I've seen other people use this kind of stuff, so I'm very familiar with it. So So we go on and we like I'm trying to think if I've basically covered this whole episode, and I think I kind of have. I kind of painted myself in a corner here. Um, yeah, I think I've kind of covered everything. That was like the last bit of something that I needed to talk to and or talk about. And 40 minutes is basically up, and that was basically how long the episode was. So I think I'm going to get out of here. Yeah, I think that covers everything. If not, there's probably going to be a rebuttal coming in next week. So with that said, I am going to get out here because I think I covered I think I covered everything. Um, I feel like chicken tonight. I don't know. Like I always kind of have this huge hesitation about ending every video because I feel like I'm like, oh, here's this huge gaping thing that I forgot about. Um, because I know there's always going to be that person that's like, oh yeah, you forgot about the one part. I'm like, oh yeah, I did forget about that. Um, but I think I'm fine. I think I'm okay with leaving this the way it is. So, with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.